How you doing, everybody? This is Phil from New York Rocks TV, and we're here in Manhattan. I'm standing next to Kevin and Joe DeBlasi. How you doing, guys?
We're doing great. We're doing great, Phil. Thanks for having us.
It's Kevin, and here's Joe, my man. How you doing, Joe?
Good. I'm doing great. How are you, Phil?
Great, great. Okay, let's talk a little bit about your story. Now, you have a book you got out here. It's called Polarized, Sex, Lies, and Family Betrayal. All right, Joe, let's start off with Joe. Talk a little bit about the book and about your story and how it became a book.
Sure. Okay. All right, like we said, my name's Joe DeBlasi. I'm 45 years old. About 25 years ago, when I was in my third year of college, I was going to college at Rutgers University. I had a mental breakdown. I got depressed first, very seriously. And then about 5 months later, I went manic. And basically, I was diagnosed with, at the time they called it manic depression. Mm-hmm. Now it's more formally known as bipolar disorder. So throughout this conversation, I might go back and forth.
Sure.
But manic depression and bipolar disorder are the same things.
Now, this all stemmed because of what happened as a child, right?
Well, it started off, I had a rough childhood, and there was also a chemical imbalance. So it was a combination of childhood and a chemical imbalance. When I was, I'll give you a brief background from my childhood. When I was very young, my parents got divorced at a very young age. Yeah. And then I was about 9 years old. I went through a custody battle. My father kidnapped me. I knew I was part of the kidnapping. It wasn't like I didn't know what was going on, but it was a staged kidnapping. Then I had to go through a rough...
Who was your dad? Your dad?
My dad's Dr. Joseph DeBlasi. He's a prominent doctor on Staten Island. His practice is on Newdorp Lane, and he's on staff at Staten Island Hospital.
And your mother and father split, right?
My mother and father, right, at the age of 3, they got divorced, and my father got remarried to my stepmother, Rita DeBlasi. So at the age of 9.5, 10, I went to live with my father. Right. And then a couple of years after that, my stepmother abused me sexually. Right. So in the course of 12, 13 years, I went through divorce.
You didn't say nothing? You didn't tell your father?
No, my father didn't find out till I was locked away in the hospital, in his hospital. Right. I was in a psychiatric unit. Right. My stepmother then came out and told him the story, and she told it in reverse chronological order.
What was that? Was it like
she said that I was coming on to her and I was the aggressor, which at that time was true. But the abuse started when I was 12 or 13. By the time I was 16 or 17, my head was all screwed up. So after I had the breakdown and I was hospitalized when I was 20, I started taking medicine, which is called lithium. I'm still on lithium. Over 25 years, I've been on every medication. I've been hospitalized 20 times. I've been arrested a couple times. I've had 60 shock treatments, also known as ECT, electroconvulsive therapy.
You were taken away. You actually were taken away from your brother because you weren't with your brother, right? You were living with your father and your stepmother, but your brother was living with the real
Stayed with my biological mother, yes.
Okay. Yes. And now what happened? Now you both got reunited? And
right. What happened was, a couple of years after I had my first breakdown, my father disowned me, basically, just turned his back on me. So then I ended up going back with my brother who's sitting here and my biological mother. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be alive. I'd either be dead, I would be in a hospital, or I'd be in jail. My brother, he's a couple of years younger than me, but he's been like my older brother, my uncle, and my father all rolled into one. He's done everything for me. And we have this book, right?
Yeah. Now your brother's a college graduate too. You went to Rutgers.
Right, I graduated Rutgers.
You took economics.
I got a degree in economics, correct.
Okay. All right, but here's the other brother, Kevin. How you doing, Kevin?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Phil, again for having us. I went to University of Pennsylvania. Actually had to sue my father, Dr. Joseph DeBlasi, for tuition. We had already become
what
estranged.
Kind of doctor was he?
He still practices. He's an internist, and he's got quite a wonderful reputation on Staten Island, that is.
What kind of doctor is he?
And again, family phisian.
Family, like general doctor.
Exactly. And that's what makes this story so much more compelling. That this father, who had orchestrated this kidnapping of his oldest son, and then bore witness to the incest,
Right.
had the audacity to disown the son when he was at his weakest. Okay, and in addition to that, he orchestrated with some help at Staten Island University Hospital a cover-up of the sexual abuse. We have minor half-brothers who were 12 and 14 at the time that the incest had come out while Joe was first hospitalized, and that would normally be mandatory reporting to either social services or the district attorney's office.
Now, why do you think that he got away with not being able to?
That's an excellent question, Phil, and we've been asking ourselves that for years. And he has quite a reputation, quite a lot of influence. Our last name's DeBlasi. We're from Canarsie. I don't have to say too much more, but I will. Quite frankly, we, prior to submitting our manuscript to ARBA, met with one of Joe's first doctors, and he was surprised to see Joe. Actually said to Joe, "You must have an incredible will to live," because this doctor had bore witness to everything that happened to Joe. He was in the hospital with this doctor for a number of months. And this doctor told us that people on staff, everyone at the hospital, was intimidated by our father. And that intimidation had to do with mafia connections. And so for years we had thought it was just
Plus
pure.
being a head doctor too, you know, you don't want to lose your job, right?
Absolutely, Phil. For years we knew, because subsequent therapists, we mentioned the name in the book, a doctor, Joe, what was the doctor, your first therapist that Mom met?
Carol Davis?
Carol Davis said that it had to have been covered up, because everything that you're telling me and everything the records say, this should have been reported. It had to be my father's influence. And we had always assumed it was just, pure abuse of power. He sends a lot of patients there, makes the hospital a lot of money. And then to find out 20 years later that it was, in addition to that, his reputation as someone with mafia influence. I mean, he had dealt with quite a number of patients with connections, and it makes sense, because you'll read in the book that my father was assisted by getting into the medical school through my grandfather's connections. They put the screws to a Jewish politician.
Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, and it's all in the book, and the book is fascinating, and it's all true. And there's a number of things we want to do with the book, and we're not just out to skin my father. We're out
It ain't
to
really about selling the book as much, because you want to get the information out there. You want to tell the story, so people that are out there have the strength that if they go through something like this, that they don't have to suffer in silence, they said, right?
Absolutely. Joe, why don't you tell Phil and the viewing audience about what you've been doing with NAMI?
Great. What's NAMI anyhow? What is it?
NAMI stands for the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill. And since about 3 weeks ago, since the book's come out, I've been giving speeches at these NAMI meetings, mostly on Long Island. But anyhow, I go about, and I just, basically what I just did here, I gave them, in a nutshell, my life story, and I tell people that, look, they don't have to write a book and have a book published, but just going out there, and maybe if they write things themselves, just getting it off their chest, whether it's to their family, to their friends, to a therapist, it'll make them feel better. And when I'm up in front of these people, they come up to me afterwards and they're hugging me. And there was one guy, this poor guy had his son very sick. He's like, you give me hope and inspiration. And I feel, look, I've been dealing with this for 25 years. I've had top-of-the-line doctors, therapists, strong family behind me, all the therapies you can have. And now I'm relatively stable. I'm married. I have a child. I own a house. If a guy like me, who's been through all of this, can't get in front of a television, a microphone, and try to destigmatize mental illness, who else can? Now, I'm not saying I'm the only one that can do it. I realize that. But I don't really see that many other people doing it. So if I go out there and I do it, and I try to be like, look, I'm a grown man, but like be the poster boy or the advocate for mental illness, for people that get abused. And once you start talking about it, like I've been talking about it a lot, people ask me, how could you be so nonchalant? You just keep talking about it. It's like me and you talking about the Mets or the Yankees. It hurts. But you get it out there.
Sometimes you need to talk about what you're going through. That's the best medicine.
The best medicine, better than sometimes.
And to write it down.
And get it out. Get it out. Get it off your chest. Because you keep it in there, it's just going to eat you alive.
Okay, but it must have been pretty tough for you guys bringing something like this out into the open, thinking like, hey, are these guys crazy? Both of them are nuts. They're just making up stories. I mean, people, there's a lot of, there is out there, there's a lot of negative.
Absolutely, Phil. And our first instinct and our first choice was to seek what I did with my college tuition, was go through the courts. I mean, I'm also an attorney.
Sure.
Joe was physically abused, sexually abused, and in a lot of other states, he would be able to bring an action. However, New York, New Jersey, there are statutes of limitations which bar a plaintiff bringing an action. In New York, once you past 23, that's it, you're out of luck. And in New Jersey, there's so many hurdles to get through. No good attorney is going to bring the case the way the law is set up, because we went to all the good attorneys, and that's why we ended up writing the book. We had been doing protests out in front of my father's office with my 86-year-old grandmother, who's now 100, who this book is dedicated to. Grandma Doll, we love you. And as Joe mentioned, one of the main goal of the book is to change the perception of mental illness. Yes, they make mentally ill people make newspaper headlines sometimes for doing really horrific things, but more often than not, it's people doing really horrific things to mentally ill people. So that's our main goal. And secondary to that would be us advocating on behalf of abused children everywhere, not just sexually abused, mentally abused, physical abuse, such as not receiving enough nutrition, milk. So we are launching a website called justiceforourkids.org. And number one goal for that website is to get the passage of the Child Victims Act. Margaret Marquis, councilwoman, congresswoman out of Queens, is sponsoring this bill, and it's failed. 8 years in a row it's failed, but we are now in a unique position. Joe has an extraordinary story, and we are already getting tremendous feedback at the national level for us to come and join the campaign to help the kids and to change the perception of mental illness.
That's great work. That's great work. But now I'll talk about the book. How long did it take you to go actually put the book together? And you're actually one of the writers. You co-wrote with him?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest secret out there in publishing, which isn't really a secret, is not everybody writes their own book. All the famous athletes that put books out, there's usually a professional writer behind it. Now, I'm an attorney. I have a pretty good sense of humor, and I'm very close to the story. And I also love this guy to death. And I didn't even have to interview him for so many parts of this book, because we've just been living with each other and therapeutically talking about it over the years. So in essence, Joe is the author, and I'm the main ghostwriter behind the book. And believe it or not, I started writing parts of the book as far back as 2001 as therapy for Joe and I.
That's when did you get reacquainted? What year
No,
was that?
Joe and I actually were reacquainted in 1991.
Because you were like estranged from each other.
Well, it wasn't coincidence that my father waited 2 years in which to throw Joe out of the house. The incest was discovered while he was inpatient at Staten Island University Hospital in March of 1989, and about 2 years to the day, a little less, my father disowned him, threw him out when he was depressed, threw him out like a lost boy, threw him out like you might throw out garbage. The same kid that he and his wife had made sick. So again, it goes back to the cover-up.
And there was no other children there, like there was an excuse maybe or something like that, that the treatment would be like that.
I tell you, the two people who perpetrated these atrocities on Joe.
And you lived with
I
your
hope
mom,
we never
so
see him again.
You weren't seeing it going
Thank
on.
God. Thank God. Thank God I was with my mom.
You didn't have to live through that.
But I lived through it just seeing the pain in Joe. A lot of people ask us, if people are saying your dad has connections, aren't you guys, scared? Well, some people ask you of defamation. Defamation, come on. I mean, what we've been through in our life, even physical pain can't compare to the mental pain that we were put through as children, separated from my brothers, my father, my grandparents.
It's very tough when your family's doing it to you, too. That's even worse.
Makes it
But
terrible.
you think they're supposed to love you more, if anything, right?
I think you're going to have to get a box of Kleenex for all of us, because there's some surprises in the book. I mean, we are obviously pointing out the villain of the story, but what makes this such a heart-wrenching thriller is the surprises at the end. There's still parts of us that wish we had a relationship with this man, and it's just a travesty that the whole thing happened. People say, "Oh, you guys are great writers." Unfortunately, we're not. My father made a great story. Unfortunately. We wish it wasn't true.
Well, you know, it can never really forgive something like this, but maybe one day, you know, he can make an amends. But I don't know if it's good enough. But it would be nice to say you're sorry. You know what I mean? And that's the main thing. Like somebody could say they're sorry, but usually they can't say they're sorry.
Well, the biggest part of healing is to forgive and to forget and to move on. Now, this book may, to my father, my stepmother, be like a nuclear bomb that maybe it does change them. I don't know. I think it would take.
What's so hard about saying, you know, I love you and I'm sorry what I did in the past and whatever.
Right.
And I have those issues too with some family members, and it's tough. You know, you want to see them say, hey, you know, they're sorry, but I don't know. You know,
people's egos, people's own psychosis, and whatever they have going on. You know, it would take a Dr. Phil and Oprah, it would take a lot of people to bring this. If somebody could bring our dysfunctional family together, I would be impressed. I mean, but we only can do what we're doing now. Is we wrote the book, we're getting our story out there. You know, we're trying to help ourselves and other people.
Yeah, you're healing. You're healing. All right. Well, guys, you know, I want to thank you guys, but I want to bring out how they can find out more about the book, and you know, they can purchase the book, and they can even get to talk to you. I mean, I'm sure they can email you and they have a conversation with you guys. So let's go, Kevin.
Absolutely, yeah. We're on Facebook on the Polarized DeBlasi, and also my Facebook page, Kevin DeBlasi. You'll see, you know, some great pictures. We were at the Boomer Esiason and Cystic Fibrosis Foundation fundraiser the other night, talking to Boomer about the book. I got Joe laughing because I just started talking to Boomer because the association, the foundation is mentioned in the book. We have some crazy stories, Jets, Mets, all true.
Big sports.
A lot of sports. My father was a big sports fan. Joe's had tryouts with the Mets and Jets that didn't necessarily end with a position. Sometimes they ended up in jail. So we had a great time with Boomer. I've been, wherever I go, I really want to advocate on behalf of the mentally ill and children. I saw Chuck Schumer at a wedding last month. I talked about Polarized. He wished me luck. You know, didn't really want to get too involved with the statute at a wedding. But wherever we go, I'm looking forward to a meeting with Congressman Peter King later on this evening.
Nice,
so we're doing it. You know.
I want to thank you, but I want to talk to Joe and end with Joe. Okay, Joe, your thoughts on, let's say, what your advice to people out there that are suffering? What would they do? What advice would you give them to do? What you know?
If you're suffering any mental illness, depression, or whatever it is, tell somebody. You know, if you don't want to go immediately get a doctor or a therapist, tell your parents, tell your siblings, tell a good friend. Just don't keep it to yourself. Now, people think, you know, it still has the stigma. Even today, people don't want to see a doctor or a therapist. But tell somebody, and then maybe they'll be able to talk you into going to, you know, maybe you're not even all that bad, but tell somebody. Right. If you're in high school, or tell your teacher or a guidance counselor. Just don't
let it eat you up inside and like fester inside you. Get it out in the open.
Right? You know, I always say, don't be a rat, right? We were brought up with that mentality. Don't be a rat. Rat yourself out, because it's the best thing you're going to do, because sitting there suffering in silence, you're just going to make it worse.
Pay me now or pay me later.
Okay, now you have that agency. Can you mention how to get in touch with the agency that
the Just For Us kids? Is that
the other one?
The NAMI, the National Alliance for Mentally Ill. You could go right on the web. You know, it's Google it, and it's all over the country. So wherever you live, they're all over. So it's NAMI, and it comes right up. National Alliance for Mentally Ill, and you know, whatever borough you live in, or Jersey, Long Island, they're all over the place.
Well, I want to thank you guys very much. You guys are great fellas from Staten Island, natives over here. Speaking on the show, best of luck to both of you. And the book we can get on Amazon, so you can check it out. All right, and thank you for watching. You're watching New York Rocks. These guys rock. Who rocks better than us, Joe? Who?
Nobody.
We rock the best, right, Kev?
Absolutely, Phil.
All right, man. Thank you very much for watching.